Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to Build. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri. One of our next guests is one of the greats. Michael Mann wrote and directed not one, not two, but multiple classics, including Heat, which is the greatest crime movie there is. That's not an opinion, it's a fact. He's here with author and investigative reporter Elaine Shannon, whose new book, Hunting LeRoux, tracks the DEA takedown of a global criminal and his band of mercenaries that together trafficked in North Korean meth, guns, murder, and nuclear proliferation. He's a bad guy. It's an incredible story written at a breakneck pace and presented by one of the great crime storytellers as the first book under his new publishing imprint, Michael Mann Books. Joining us well are two DEA agents who themselves hunted Paul LeRoux and took him down, Lou Milione and Tommy Cindric. Everybody give them a huge round of applause. Let's hear it for them. Thank you so much for being here. I think a lot of congratulations are, I should give them a round. Congratulations on taking down the criminal and congratulations on writing an amazing book about it. How did you get started writing this book? When did you first get engaged, get involved, and what was it about Paul LeRoux that fascinated you?
Last question first. He was the most fascinating criminal leader I had ever run across, and I've written hundreds, maybe thousands of stories about organized crime. I was in the middle of something else. I was in Afghanistan writing about the heroin trade and how it finances the war. I'd come back and I was broadening that to look at what organized crime finances secretly that now wrecks our world. And I heard about this guy who had been arrested and his hitmen were being arrested. And as I heard just a little bit about him, I had to know more because he was something different than anybody I'd ever run across. His technology, he was an entrepreneurial model, a Silicon Valley model, which meant he created a multinational empire with his laptop and a chair.
Now, Michael, as I said at the top, you've made some of the greatest crime movies there is, including Heat, which I do think is the best of the best. I'm curious, as we've seen your crime movies, you start with something like Thief, and you have this very localized crime where you have a guy who's breaking into safes, and then we get to Heat, and we have someone who's a bit broader, and he's hitting big banks, and now we have something like Black Hat a few years ago, which is about a criminal hacker who is basically shaking up the stock exchange or the stock market, as well as hacking nuclear plants. And now we have something like Paul LeRoux. Has your interest in crime as well broadened, or what the scope of crime can be?
Yeah, absolutely. It broadened because Paul LeRoux constitutes the new now. It's a quantum step in the business methodology. If you're a professional criminal and you're asking yourself, what's the most current business model? To me, Paul LeRoux constitutes the innovation of exactly that. And what's so unusual about Elaine's book is the really intimate proximity she brings us into the rooms, into the persona of LeRoux, and then at the same time into these guys, into the 960 group, which is a very elite, secretive group within the DEA, who've taken down Manjul Kassar, Victor Boot, the same people, and bring us into what they're doing. So it became one of the best crime stories and police stories, in a way, investigative stories that I ever encountered.
One of the things about the criminals and of all your work is they have a moral code, even though they are professional criminals. And with Paul LeRoux, we see really no moral code. Do you guys think, as crime has become far more expansive and global and more behind a laptop and rather than up close and personal, the moral code even of criminals has kind of dissipated? I'll take that to you, Elaine.
Absolutely. Paul LeRoux was born with a couple of gifts. One of them is the ability to learn all kinds of very difficult coding very fast. He was in the cyber security field when he became a young adult. His other gift was that he has no conscience at all. He does not care what he destroys. But you should ask the agents.
Yeah. What shocked you most about Paul LeRoux when you first got confronted with him?
I guess the fact that he was so multifaceted in his brilliance. Paul is like, I've been in law enforcement 28 years before I retired. Paul is like no other target criminal that I've ever seen. Brain power far surpasses that of anyone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, incredibly nimble, incredibly facile, could go wherever he had to go, completely amoral. And when you marry that amorality with that psychotic brilliance and kind of an aptitude for criminality, he just drove down that path and created so much death and destruction. It was amazing.
What was so fascinating to me about LeRoux is that lots of criminals, I don't want to say most, I don't want to generalize, but oftentimes with criminals, they are born into a crime family or they come from an area where they have to become criminals to survive and they rise up. LeRoux did not need this. He just loved the idea of being a criminal. He loved the idea of being the boss of a criminal organization, no matter what it took. Am I incorrect in that read of him, Elaine?
Oh, absolutely. He wanted to be called the boss.
Yeah, he doesn't emerge out of any criminal subculture, any established criminal subculture. But all those kind of categories and the way we're used to thinking of things, which come to us from dramas, is really totally broken down. So the people who were involved in money laundering, for example, some of the big drug cartels in the end of the 90s, they're basically MBAs who just are willing to accept a little bit more risk. So they'll locate them, including major banks, by the way. So they'll locate themselves in Buenos Aires or Mexico City, and they will launder money. And so the criminality is something that has become so diffuse that it really defies definition. Plus, as the world has shrunk because of the internet, everything is loose, everything is open, everything is globalized, everything is transnational. So the movement, particularly in the what Tommy and Lou described as the ungoverned places on the planet, it has become ubiquitous, and the ability to trade in anything from fissile materials to nuclear guidance systems to provide services, products like North Korean meth or cocaine, it's all facilitated in a shrunk, we're a much smaller community. It makes all this possible.
When you first sat down across from Paul LeRoux, what were you most struck by in speaking to him?
His eloquence.
Really?
He controlled the room. Wherever he was, he controlled the room. When he took the stand in the Samuel Stillwell trial, he took the stand and he completely controlled that room. The jury, the judge, the defense attorneys, the gallery. Everybody was fixated on Paul. He is eloquent, he has a commanding voice, and he has a commanding presence.
I'd add to that. Seeing him at the moment when he got arrested, when we lured him into Liberia on the charges out of the Southern District of New York, you saw massive ego and complete confidence that he had everything locked down because he kept saying, I know about your investigation. I was talking about a different investigation. We knew because we were able to we were fortunate to be able to work very quickly and very behind the scenes that he didn't know about ours. But to watch him realize that he was no longer in control of corrupting the area where he lived, of having everyone on this payroll, and to now we had a situation where he was going to be charged. He was charged in the U.S. and he was going to be en route back to the U.S. to face those charges. You saw him begin to lose a little bit of that control, and that was fascinating.
Sorry, go ahead.
He was scared to death of going to New York. He feared going to the Southern District. But most people we arrest do.
Why is that?
Most aggressive prosecutors in the world, best prosecutors in the world, and work very closely with us. And we just kind of, for lack of a better term, we don't take anything off of anybody between us and the Southern District of New York, meaning 960. And we would fight whatever fight we had to bring a guy like Paul LeRoux into the Southern District for trial.
One of the things that I was struck by the book was how much your work required allies around the world. It required different countries to come together. I mean, right at the beginning of the book, we see that multiple people have to be arrested in different parts of the world, which requires many different facets of governments and countries. Is that something that is getting easier or harder to do?
Look, it's probably one of the most critical parts. I mean, DEA is spread out all over the world, largest federal law enforcement presence overseas. If it's not for our foreign counterparts that we work with, whether it's Liberia, Estonia, Thailand, those are people that we've been in their houses, we've spent lots of time with them. They know that we're not going to cut and run, that we'll be there with them. If we didn't have those relationships that would really hang it out there, whether it was in, like, for example, Monrovia, Liberia, and the son of the president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, we couldn't do these cases. Is it getting easier? I mean, we still have those relationships. We're both retired from DEA. DEA still has those relationships. Other federal law enforcement has some of those relationships. It's the most critical part of our ability to work collaboratively with them against a lot of these transnational threats.
And I would identify those three places, Liberia, Estonia, and Thailand, as three of the best relationships DEA has, long-term relationships, great counterparts, great people, interested in rule of law, interested in justice.
When did you first start seeing transnational criminals like LeRoux, and will we see more of them? Do you think it's impossible that we'll see one as smart and as sort of calculating as him?
I would just say with LeRoux, he was Silk Road before Silk Road became cool is kind of the term I keep using. He was before Ross Ulbricht. He was before all that. He was ahead of the curve. Are you going to see more? Yeah, you're going to see more. And unless you start training up the younger generation of agents and law enforcement officers, you're going to be behind the 8 ball again.
You know, Elaine, some of the analogies that you use for Paul LeRoux is the gig economy, and you talk a lot. I mean, one of the hitmen essentially contacted a mercenary via LinkedIn, which I think is just hilariously depressing in a lot of ways. Was that something that really blew your mind, that Paul LeRoux was so tapped into this kind of like Craigslist economy of killers?
I find it fascinating. The term mercenary Facebook comes from a mercenary. And I'm sorry, the Facebook people probably won't like that, but it's true.
Oh, we're not Facebook. Go for it.
No, it's fake Facebook-ish. These wars have created a lot of very well-trained killers, shooters, and they look for jobs. And so they talk to each other on WhatsApp, on Signal, on Wicker. When there's a gig, anti-piracy gig or security gig, I have been guarded for when I went to Baghdad with Blackwater. I didn't go with them, but they guarded us when I was with the Secretary of State. They're all over the place. They have a distinctive look. They have a distinctive dress. It's all in my book if you want to read what brands to wear so you can be spotted as a mercenary. I have that list because they get discounts.
Also,
I'm not making this up. I heard this from Jack, the informant, who said, "Oh yes, Oakley sunglasses, and you got the Nike this, and you got the Under Armour that." There's a list, and you can see them about a mile away.
and also, like Paul hired his entire engineering team for the missile guidance system off of Craigslist. That all came, they were Romanian engineers hired off of Craigslist. That's how he did it.
Free market principles jumping in and applying it in the criminal world.
Yeah, Michael, when did you first hear about Paul LeRoux? When did you and Elaine start talking about this? This is the first book to come out of your new imprint.
Yeah.
Why this book, and how long has your relationship been with Elaine?
Elaine and I go way back. She wrote a book called Desperados, which I made into a miniseries called Drug Wars, the Kiki Camarena story, which was about the torture and murder of a DEA agent in Mexico in the 80s, and we made a 6-hour miniseries out of it in 89, 90.
What an Emmy
And
for the best
won an Emmy
of
for
the
this
year.
miniseries that year. And Elaine's work is spectacular. She has an ability to drop you into the rooms as if you really feel you're there. And it's not with characters in a Hollywood drama that may be derivative of other Hollywood dramas. This is the real people really talking. The cover photo is from surveillance body camera of an informant who was duped back into his operation named Jack. So it's all true, you know. But we, when Elaine sent me a couple of chapters of it, it was the proximity it dropped me into as a reader was so intoxicating that we kind of jumped it ahead, and this became the first book of Michael Mann books to be published.
And you're developing it, right? Is it in development
Yes,
right now
we are.
to be
Yes,
a
we
movie?
are. Yeah.
That's incredible. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see who plays Paul LeRoux. And Lou, you have an acting background. I imagine you'll be playing yourself in the movie. Is that true?
Thank you for bringing that up. Thanks for bringing that up.
It's in the book. I'm sorry,
I haven't talked to Michael about that yet, but
but it's in the cards. One of the things I'm curious. We talk about this kind of criminal and how he uses the free market principles, but how also he can hide behind the cryptography of the different apps. And in the book, Jack is someone, the character that you just brought up, is someone who sort of broke some luck for you guys in the case. If that's not the case with someone, if you don't have someone like that, is LeRoux really the hardest kind of criminal to catch because he's so brilliant when it comes to how to hide his tracks?
100%. He would have gone underground and stayed in the Philippines if he would have caught wind of it. You have to find the right in all the time.
There's always, I mean, the groups that we were involved in for like over a decade. There's always a way to. We can always find a way in, and it's always going to be through a human source. But the source is not just sent, and they do their own thing. It's carefully controlled, like any other investigative technique, whether it's a judicial wiretap, whatever it is. The source is another tool, and it wasn't kind of just. Certainly, there's some luck that goes with any of this. There's some luck that goes. No, there is some luck that goes with it. But Tommy and Eric, the primary case agents on this case, were able to develop him, protect him, and then give him the proper instructions, working with the prosecutors to get into this guy. And at any step, if he missteps or says the wrong thing, the whole thing can crumble. The whole case goes out the window.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say, these guys are incredibly modest. They pull off the most incredible stunts imaginable. It's way more extravagant than anything that you could make up. The taking down of Victor Boot, the taking down of Manjul Alcazar goes back to Gunrunner living openly in a $30 million mansion in Marbella.
For those who don't know, Victor Boot was a gun smuggler, a weapon smuggler who was coined the Lord of War. They made a movie out about him.
Called the Lord of War,
yeah.
The Merchant of Death, and people like Victor Boot can buy the best counterintel on the planet, and they managed to convince Victor Boot that they're really the FARC and they're interested in buying rockets to knock down American airplanes. Okay, and what the accomplishment of that, the degree of difficulty of some of the operations that they pulled off, particularly the rounding up of all three hit teams on 3 different continents within 9 hours simultaneously, is extraordinary.
Paul LeRoux, I think when we think of people who get involved in crime, especially at his level and are making as much money, they want to show off. They want to have flashy boats. They want to have big homes. And LeRoux kind of had a lot of those things, but he didn't care to use them or show up on them. Is that true, right? He was not really that flashy, even though he owned all these things.
No, Jack, the informant, the agent of penetration, talks about walking in to his penthouse for his job interview, and it's empty. There is a chair, a table, a widescreen TV, and a sofa. And a bunch of guns. That's it. Because he wanted to be ready to move. He wore cargo shorts and these giant shirts and T-shirts and flip-flops or some ugly kind of shoe. He was always ready to go. But he did like certain luxuries. He loved women. He had 11 kids by 7 women that he knows of, and probably many more. He would go off on, what did you call it, raves with a lot of hookers. He just didn't, he was very Silicon Valley in the sense that he dressed down and he didn't like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you write about a scene where he drew a lot of his inspiration to become wildly wealthy from when he first saw a series of like Russian oligarch yachts, and he thought that's kind of what I want. Yet at the same time, it's almost like he just wanted the power the status that comes with. He didn't actually want the yacht, which is fascinating for someone who gets involved in the criminal life.
Yeah, he was 26 years old. His boss was 27. And they were creating a new company to make cybersecurity. So the boss, to inspire him, took him to the south of France where he had a villa and said, you can get rich, you can do this. If you make this company, if you work all the time, you've all heard this from your own bosses, work all the time for me, I'll make you rich. He wasn't impressed with the movie stars in Cannes or the casino in Monte Carlo. It was only when they got to the yacht basin and he saw the super yacht that the Russians had and the women and the guards and the chain link fits and all that. He said, I want that. I'm going to get that. That meant being a billionaire.
Why do you think that is? What do you think it is about a personality that sees that and wants that? It's almost like he was born to be a criminal in a way.
Well, he was born. Something is going on in his brain that is very unusual. And it may be a psychopath. He's been called that.
He wanted some of that, but that's not what made him do what he does. or do what he did. What made him do what he did is that it was a process, as Tommy was saying and Lou was saying earlier. It's a process of he wanted to do what had never been done before. So it wasn't just the dollars. The cash flow is points on the scoreboard. What really motivated him is to think of something that no one else had thought of, or people thought was impossible, and to pursue that.
How, excuse me, when it comes to Paul LeRoux, how often do you find criminals who have no interest in luxury the way that he did, that their sole interest is to be a criminal and the best criminal?
He was my first. I mean, the fact that I'll never forget, we were talking to him one day here in the Southern District of New York, and one of the prosecutors brought Grimaldi's pizza in. And, we're going to have a nice homemade pizza, right? We get done, and Paul goes, Tom, I like the Domino's better. He wasn't concerned about anything extravagant. It was simply the basics, and then the process of what he was doing. Always the process. Had to be intriguing.
So it was about the accumulation of wealth to be able to say that he had it, and then about watching how he could tear a country apart or tear people apart in order to sort of accumulate that wealth.
The accumulation of wealth, I think, is what Michael said. It was points on the scoreboard. That's it. That just showed where he was, but that really didn't drive him. The process of working is what drove him. When it was the missile guidance system, it was the missile guidance system. When he was arrested, it was working with us. Whatever, I'm completely serious. You would sit there in a room with him, and we would just work and work. 8 hours a day, sitting in the Southern District of New York, running an entire operation from the 5th Florida courthouse.
And what did he love? What did he love about that process? What was the process that he loved? Because he was essentially turning in everybody that worked for him at that point.
The manipulation, the
Trying
game.
to manipulate you and trying
No,
to...
not us. The other guys.
Yeah.
He liked the game, just like the agents and the prosecutors are addicted to the game of trying to catch the bad guys. He became part of the process. He wanted to be there with us. It was his new team. We were the new team. It benefited him. If we were on the same team, that's great. If we weren't on the same team, that was okay with him too. We'd just go to the other side and do it there.
So just a complete amorality and obsession with process, and it's all fun for him, no matter if people are getting arrested or if people are dying. It's all fun and games for him.
Yeah, and it's not and it's not clinical. It's clinical because he's in custody.
Right.
He's in custody. He's under control. He has no other option. So it's a very cold analysis. So he knows he's got to join the team to work. He's not going to get a free pass in no way. But when you look at what he did when no one was watching, which is kind of the privilege and the intimate part of what we do, we get to see what somebody is doing when they don't think anyone is listening or recording. I mean, these were people being shot in the face up close. I mean, people were being murdered. I mean, this is really brutal stuff. So,
Well, Lou, you yourself went undercover as a DEA agent to be assassinated, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we needed to come up with targets. Myself and one of the other agents, an Afghan-American, unbelievable agent in the group. Yeah. We call him Taj, is his nickname. We were the bait, but we were never. Look, we were in Monrovia. We did all.
Taj. I chose Lou because he was the boss.
Yeah, but we were never in harm's way. But we didn't want to use like random pictures from Google where they could figure out who these people were. So they just dangled us out there. It was fine.
Right. So very modest still.
No, I mean seriously, we were. It was
By the way, Lou is the ASAC and is one of the founders of the 960 group.
Can you guys talk about what the 960 group is? Because I feel like we've mentioned a couple.
So the group is there were 4 groups. Started as one back in 2002. The primary mission of the groups were, and it was in DEA Special Operations Division. It was identify, infiltrate, indict, capture, and convict untouchable targets, transnational criminals all over the world, Latin America, Africa, Asia. Go wherever you had to go. We had a very, very streamlined chain of command, tremendous support from our leadership, and we got to pick agents that were willing to go wherever, do whatever they had to do to make the cases, and we did all our cases with Southern District of New York. We needed aggressive prosecutorial partners. That's what we do. It could be money laundering, drug trafficking. There'll always be a drug nexus, but as anything, these transnational criminals are pretty much the engine behind terrorist groups, behind anything that's going on. So.
You know, Elaine, one of the things that you mentioned a few minutes ago at the beginning of this interview was that these wars that we are fighting have created people who have skills that are looking for something like this, but they've also created an opening for a lot of these criminals, for terrorist groups to fund, and for, like we see, he starts working in Somalia and trading weapons in there. Can you talk a little bit about that? That like how chaos and sows roads for guys like this?
Yeah, there are people in the criminal underworld who invest in chaos because it makes a chaotic environment or a weak state makes it a lot easier for them to operate as a base or as a transshipment center. That is why Paul went to Somalia, because he could buy a big piece of it. He was setting up an Amazon for Arms platform where he was going to have an invisible city. He was going to have barracks. He was going to have a fort, a landing strip for cargo planes, a port for cargo ships, and bring in arms from all over the world. His emails about how this was going to be structured are amazing, and there's some architectural drawings for it that he hired people to do in my book. The Iran project involved hiring a bunch of Romanian engineers to reprogram GPS chips, $30 chips, so that they would work in a small rocket or small missile, the kind that Iran gives to its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. Right now, the Hezbollah and Hamas shoot a lot of rockets at Israel, but they don't hit anything because they're stupid. If you can navigate them and hit command and control structures, you can overwhelm the Iron Dome, you can kill thousands of civilians, you can cause Israel, you can provoke Israel to strike back at Iran, you can blow up a big part of the world.
To go on to those GPS chips real quick, the key to it was he could do it cheaply. Okay, so GPS chip or the guidance systems that sell for multi-million dollars, he was basically saying I could do this for $1,000. So the amount of rockets that could be shot mid to short range will go up astronomically. The dome then could not protect everyone because Hezbollah and Hamas could very easily afford these types of missiles.
And he has no ideological reasons going into this. It's simply because he could sow this chaos.
He had businesses in Israel. He had employees in Israel. That's where his black market pharmaceutical business was. He was willing to rain death on them just because he enjoyed the idea of raining death. He was also going to sell these cheap, smart rockets, like Saturday Night Special rockets, I call them, to warlords and guerrilla groups in Africa and Asia, and he told Jack, I want to start more civil wars because war is money.
Yeah, I want to go to our audience questions in just a second, but I am curious how he obviously he needed initial capital to do a lot of these things that he started doing, even capital to start his pharmaceutical business, his illegal pharmaceutical business. And I was never really clear, was it the gambling that he did in Panama that gave him the initial capital? This is in the weeds for anybody who hasn't read the book, but I don't care. I want to know.
I don't think he needed much. He had a computer. And that's the whole point of him is in today's entrepreneurial world, you have a computer, you have a chair, you have a table, and you might have somebody else working with you, or maybe not. He's never really had a friend. He started this e-commerce, online shopping thing we all love, we all do it, for drugs, for pills. We like pills. They were pretty mild pills. They were Viagra and hair loss pills and all of that, not even opioids at first, but there was a big market, and in 4 years, he generated $300 million in sales, selling pills online. And that was a pretty good cash cow.
There it is. Wow. We have some questions from the audience. Who has a question? Hi.
Hey, first I just want to say, Mr. Mann, I'm a huge fan, but I just actually want to talk, quick question regarding Paul LeRoux. So right now, I've been reading in the news a lot that, obviously the DEA there's some type of deal that's been struck with Mr. LeRoux. I don't know if that's true or not, but regarding his potential working with the DEA to help, try to get the people that worked with him specifically. So my question really is, there's been talks, also I was reading that potentially that the people in the 960 group think that he may only get 10 years, which specifically he's already served 7 of those 10 years. I don't know, like I said, if any of this is true, but if that's true, in the next 3 years, he could potentially be a free man. And if it's possible, is there any concern that he may actually redo the things that he's already done.
So to be clear, yeah, I saw some of that in the press. There was no immunity deal with DEA. The way it works is somebody's arrested, they're facing serious time. They have to plead guilty, be completely truthful with everything that they're doing. And if the prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York in this case, deem it worthy to give him a cooperation agreement, he'll get that. The judge ultimately makes the decision as to what the cooperator is going to get. But to be very clear, we have no idea what he's going to get. He's currently in custody. He's facing significant time, and a judge will decide based upon his conduct, but also based upon his cooperation. And remember, if we waited and we were reactive, you have to use, these are very insulated, dangerous networks. You have to use people to be able to get back into them. So, and he did it, not on the street, he did it from in custody.
The only other thing I would add to that is I know there's been rumors that he's out, and Lou just commented. He is not out. He is arrested, and he is being held in an undisclosed location, okay?
In custody, though.
In
Federal custody.
In federal custody. He is not out walking the streets. He is not in Singapore. He is not anywhere anybody else thinks he may be. And also, nobody was duped by his cooperation. We know full well what Paul's capable of. The judge has the ultimate decision. She's heard him testify. It's up to her.
He's exposed up to life, but the minimum could be 10 years, but it's unlikely that anybody who's heard him testifying would give him 10 years. He's going to get a significant time, maybe life, maybe not. It just depends on the judge's mood. He could get out someday. And he's going to be a problem when he gets out. That's why the last line in my book is that Eric said it. He won't think there's another Tommy and Eric. These are the two agents, but there are.
He basically told you guys that when he got out, he was going to get up to more crimes, too. You guys like, what are you going to do when you get out? He's like, crimes.
It's who he is. I mean, and if you start out, look, I currently work for a conservation company where we do illicit wildlife trafficking investigations. You see the confluence of illegal mining tied into the drug trade, tied into all these other things. It all comes together. If he says I'm getting in gold, he's getting in criminal. If he says I'm getting in timber concessions, he's getting involved in crime. Whatever those things are, and if it's in Africa, I can promise you it's crime. Okay.
Now that you mentioned that, maybe the judge is watching and take that into consideration.
One more question, right here.
Hi, my question is directed to the two agents. I just want to ask, how much information from the case did you have to withhold from someone like Elaine? And I guess for Elaine, if there was information withheld, how did that affect your telling of the book? And Michael, how it's how's that gonna affect your film?
I would say first, most of this is open source. If you go check Pacer out of the United States Attorney's Office, you'll see everything, okay? It's public record because it's the American judicial process. We don't hide anything unless it's for a specific purpose of an ongoing investigation or to protect the public. Then we'll hold it back until that time is passed. When that time is passed, it gets opened, okay? Everything's there. You can read it in the court filings pretty much.
Look, that's one of the beauties of the process. It's completely transparent. It's, if someone's judicially expelled, they come back, we go to court of law, citizens decide somebody's guilt or innocence. And the other thing to add is, we felt very comfortable with Elaine because of who she is, the fact that she would always do the right thing, the fact that she would protect the information if we had to protect it. So we had the clearance to be able to speak to her, and it wouldn't be with anybody. We wouldn't get into the intimate details with anybody. Frankly, it was a big part of it was Elaine and then Michael.
And I would encourage you to read watch Drug Wars or read Desperados if you want to know why Elaine's trusted.
I think there's still a few secrets. I don't know everything. I will never know everything. I'm just a journalist. And there are names that I didn't disclose and that you won't disclose. But I think we know enough to be able to tell this story. And I think there are more stories like this, but not quite someone with this brilliance. He's unique.
Elaine's very modest. She has a truth-telling style and a tremendous reputation because she tells the real story, not the story that's fashionable, or I couldn't get the real story, so I went to a peripheral story and presenting it as the real story. She has that that journalist integrity that is becoming in shorter and shorter supply in the age of bloggers. And even if it's something she doesn't, that's not good for the narrative, if it's corroborated once or twice, that's what's going to lead her to. So there's an intellectual honesty that is at the core of a reputation, and that's why these gentlemen work with Elaine.
The only other secret I'll add is there's a place on Atlantic Avenue we had beers that nobody knows about. So.
In Brooklyn? Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn?
Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. That's where we came up with the mantra.
Brooklyn. Why did you say Brooklyn?
No, I gave up a little bit.
Atlantic Avenue is pretty long,
yeah.
but I'm assuming it's the Brooklyn Heights maybe area.
There was
or
there was a
Cobble Hill.
nice place where the plan came together one night.
And you guys still have drinks there?
Myself and my partner do when we're in New York.
When he says nice, he means dump. He likes very cheap beer. It says that in the book. And as you can see...
Is this a place that has karaoke on Friday nights that everyone goes to? I think.
I don't know if it does, but if it did,
try,
I'd be
nice
singing it a little bit.
I want to go hang out with DEA agents. That sounds fun. Guys, I love the book. Congratulations. Incredible work on your part in catching him. Incredible work in writing the book. I couldn't put it down. I loved reading it from the first page to the end. And I just want to know more about it. And I can't wait for the movie. The book is on shelves now. It's called Hunting LeRoux. Everybody give them a huge round of applause for coming out.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.